Well, hey there, Mama. It's your friend and fellow working mama, Karina O'Brien, here for another episode of the Working Mama podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about one of the biggest transitions we will be going through in our working mum journey. It's that first 90 days back at work after maternity leave. So, whether you're counting down the days with excitement of returning back into work or dreading the return, this episode is all about helping set you up for success, managing expectations, and creating a work life rhythm that actually works for you. I'll share with you some practical tips, mindset shifts, and strategies to help you navigate this period with confidence because we all know that it is going to be an emotional roller coaster.
Welcome to the Working Mama podcast, a show that provides real world tips, tricks, and advice to all working mamas on how they can have a career, family, and hopefully one day break the glass ceiling.
Before we even step foot back in the office, there's a lot that we can do to help make the transition much smoother. Returning back to work may feel like a physical transition, where one day you're at home and the next day you're either physically back at the desk at your home office or you're back in the office. But in reality, this is actually a transition period over a number of months, both in the lead up to returning, but also once you have returned. So, here are a few things to think about before your official return date. Number one, it's about having the conversation with your employer or your manager prior to your return. It's ideal to have this conversation about 3 or 4 weeks minimum out from your return so you both can align and prepare. Often return to work, we think of obviously ourselves, but also a good consideration is about the employer. Okay, what have they got going on? How can you pretty much just slot back in? You've both got expectations. They'll have expectations on you as much as we too would, want to deny it. They will. But also, you've got expectations. You've changed. You're a whole new person thanks to matrescence. Through this, you then go, okay, I need to realign on what the expectations are. So that's why it's really, really useful to have a meeting, having a sit down, ideally maybe over a casual coffee, and you can then find what that middle point is. It's a really good way as well to use your keeping in touch days if you're based in Australia. If you are in Australia, you're entitled to what's called keeping in touch days. These are 10 paid days. It's important they are paid by your employer that you're entitled to within a 12-month period. And you can then go into your organization, and it's a really good way to help with that connection, to help that first 90 days transition work really well for you. As I mentioned before, having a catch up could be casual, could be going into the office or something like that, to have a meeting and alignment discussion on the expectations and clarifying the expectations for your role. Discussing a return to work transition plan. We often don't talk about this, but it can also be really useful. Okay, what's your plan to go back from obviously being on maternity leave back into, what that end game is? It could be maybe the days that you're wanting to work. You could maybe start off by 1 day a week, 2 days a week, and then slowly build up. It could be just there's a whole range of different scenarios. Ultimately, you probably need to determine what that is before you go into that meeting, just to see if it's even possible. It's always good as well to align and discuss on what your workload is, different roles. Say, for example, if you're in more of a consulting or if you're a lawyer, may have expectations around your maybe billable hours and what your role is. Others, it could be if you're going back into more of like a 9 to 5 role, not with say billable hours. You could even just say, okay, well, what's the expectations on my role? Just so you can then also understand where your manager or your employer is coming from. And you can also then maybe counter that with your expectations. But as I said, try and meet somewhere in the middle, because that's often the hardest as well. When you're returning, the expectations are aligned. And when they're not aligned, just like most things in leadership and management, it'll all start falling apart. So communication, also being really clear on what you're wanting, is going to be really, really, really critical. Also really good as well, find out if things have changed. There's so much that can happen when we're on leave, new management, new systems, you name it. There's so many different things. Also during this discussion, discussing what flexible work options they are and also what any other accommodations you might need. So do you want to work from home, hybrid, office setup and things like that? It's a little bit easier a few years after COVID to have these kind of conversations, but it's also good to have them, have them out in the open. Also, if you've got a flexible work request and if they've, for some reason not adhering to it, you also do have the right, if you're in Australia, to email or to contact them, and they've got 21 days to come back to you with a reasonable answer. And, you can also dispute that if need be. Also, having a good discussion about finding out if you are breastfeeding, where the pumping room is, and if you need to express what the process is around this. Again, you have a legal right to have a space that is not the toilet and it's not necessarily the first aid room to be able to express and to pump and also to store the milk as well. And that you've got this safe and also comfortable space in which to do this. Also, plan a reboarding period and don't expect to be 100% on day one. Just like when you're coming back from, say, a holiday. We're never great on our first day back. So don't expect to be at 100% day one. As I said earlier, think about this as a transition period. Another way that I would actually also suggest is actually asking for certain meetings to be set up. It might be with some key stakeholders, maybe people in your team. Just really getting those meetings to help you realign and re-engage with some of those key stakeholders helps really build the relationships. Also just has those formal catch-ups. Obviously, you're going to have probably those informal coffee ones as well. But as working mums, we've got less time generally because we would generally, I would say, probably more often than not, actually initially go back part-time. So our time is precious. We don't have as many times, time for coffee catch-ups and the like. So that's also where just having those meetings, you can also get briefed on any changes. You can also find out, what's the lay of the land, what's going on. As I said, really rebuilding those relationships. Treat this as like you're a new employee as well. You could always play that, oh, I didn't know what's happening here or what's happening there, just to allow you to get up to speed. And use that in the first couple of weeks to your advantage. Another thing as well, so that's the work component. Then from a home front, trialing a new routine before you go back on your first date. This could be having a practice run of daycare drop-offs, commutes, and the morning prep. I would also suggest to have 1 to 2 weeks minimum of childcare prior to your return with the transition. This not only allows your child to go back and, start to form those relationships and those bonds with your educators or whoever is actually looking after your child in that period, but also allows you some time to actually just prepare physically and emotionally for this transition. So you can even take yourself out for a massage, even just having a coffee on your own, those little simple things. You can even go shopping to find a new outfit or so. But just having that time, and also just for yourself, but also for your child to do that adjustment, because it is an adjustment for them as well. Also adjusting to wake up and bedtime routines in the lead up. It's definitely going to be a shock having to be at work at maybe 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, but also having a young child. No doubt they're probably your alarm clock as well. But, also getting the extra sleep because you've got extra mental load of going back into work. And certainly as well, having a backup plan for those sick days and the unexpected hiccups. So speak to your partner or your husband or even people in your village, such as grandparents or close friends, on how you may navigate this. Because that first phone call that you get from childcare, and I'm sorry to say, yes, there will be that, I'm sorry, your child has a temperature. Can you please come and collect them phone call? And your heart will miss a beat probably for that moment. But unfortunately, it won't be the first, no doubt. And so it's having that conversation of how you will manage that and navigate it. Much of this return to work is about the mental preparation of, okay, how am I going to deal with this? You won't necessarily be able to plan for every situation, but having a conversation with key people around you is definitely going to help. And that's also what I'm just trying to, through this episode, give you some things to consider, I would say. Everyone has a different way about going about return. Everyone's got different circumstances. So these aren't prescriptive of what you must do. It's more about considerations. Another thing from the home front as well, and I would actually probably say this is probably one of the biggest and most important things to get you to consider about returning back into work, is about how you're going to sort out the mental load and also the logistics in advance. Don't do this down the track. Ideally, do this before you go back to work, because women continue to wear most of the mental load even when they return back into work. So, what's happened? You've been on maternity leave. You've probably picked up a few extra tasks of helping the household function. You go back to work, then you keep doing those tasks, plus going back to work, plus no doubt the logistics and things like that of childcare drop off and everything else in between. And it's exhausting. There's a reason why women are feeling so burnt out. It's because we're wearing this load. And also, a really good way of before you go back to work is schedule time with your husband or your partner and have a conversation on how the new routine will look like for your family. You could even pretend that, you're going through a week and just talk about it. Okay, Monday, you're doing this. This is what's going to happen. And so you just role play it out a bit. And so who's going to be responsible for what task? Who's going to handle drop off pickups? Who's going to do the meal planning, the shopping, the meal preps and the cooking and things like that. It's a really good thing that you have those conversations before you go back. So, day one, you're going, oh my goodness, we haven't had this conversation, and you feel like you're getting home and having to do it all. So it's really important that you have it. Sometimes there are situations where it can't necessarily be shared, but it's a really good thing that you can, if you're not sharing one thing, but then they'll pick up something else. But it's really important to make sure you're both aligned on this and you're on the same page, because trust me, it can be a really, really big issue if it's not addressed, or if you let just everything go and you're like, oh, it's all right, I'll do everything. I'm only part-time. No, you're not part-time, because particularly with a young child, when you're not doing paid work, you are going to be doing and so much with that child, because they're really going to no doubt be wanting you as well. So meal prep where you can, outsource things such as cleaning and that kind of stuff to lighten the load, managing childcare transitions, and also the separation anxiety. So I've also got a checklist that I've got in the show notes if you're looking to help you around the transition back of the mental load. But I would also suggest, the Eva Rodesky, the Fair Play cards are also really helpful, particularly around structuring the conversation. So there's 2 resources for you. So that's more on the preparation, and both in the work front, but also in the number one. So it's a bit of that pre-return preparation, as I said. So now we also then get into the return, and I really want to have a chat to you now about managing the expectations. And one of the biggest reasons of returning back into work, we all feel overwhelmed. It's not necessarily by external elements, it's the pressure we put on ourselves. So that's why I just want to have a quick chat with you now about setting realistic expectations, so you don't feel like you have to be this superhero and then super mum from day one. Also, newsflash, there's no such thing as a perfect mum. There's no such thing as a perfect working mum. There's no perfect way of doing anything. So we just need to let go of this idea of perfectionism. Please don't look at others and compare yourself to them. You don't know what's going on in their world. They're probably giving you that real snippet of their lives, making it look Instagram worthy. Who knows what show and mess is going on in the background. So just do what's best for both you and your family and your child and everything around you. Don't worry about all the other stuff, particularly in that return. Just be in that bubble of you, your child, and your immediate family, and doing what's best for them. It's okay if you don't hit the ground running. No one is expecting you to. People know that this is a transition that you're going to slowly ramp up, and it takes time to adjust back in. You've no doubt been away for 6, 10, 12 months away out of the workforce. You've been doing some really, really important work of raising a human, getting to know this human, keeping them alive. That's amazing. So please acknowledge the amazing work and the transition that you've gone through, something called matrescence, and just go easy on yourself. Success isn't about doing everything perfect. It's about making progress. Put one foot in front of the other and just take those and celebrate the little wins. It's one step at a time. Also then, Define what success looks like for you. This is going to be different for everyone. It might be leaving work on time because maybe pre kids, you were a serial late worker. You're like, right, I really need to leave work maybe at 4:30, 5 o'clock. Also, could be about completing a task or simply, you know what, getting through the first day or week or even month. So, what I'd suggest to do is actually write down what your top priorities are, even if they're only maybe 3 or 4 things the first 90 days. So, 90 days, 3 months. For example, this could be about adjusting to the routine, helping your child set into childcare, trying to actually stay sane. Could be maybe going for a walk, maybe start off by saying like once a week or something like that. Just set those really small targets. Could even saying enjoying going for a hot coffee. That might be what success looks like for you. And align as well with your husband or partner on what your family values are, because then they can be your North Star in setting boundaries and defining what success looks like. So, for example, it might be a value is that you want to be home for putting your child to bed, for example. And it could be, look, that's something that's you're there. You may want to share the nighttime routine, or you want to sit down maybe for dinner and things like that together. Say if they're maybe one, or you say dinner all together, that can be something that's your value. So you're then going to create boundaries, particularly between work and life, to help create that. And I've got many podcast episodes to help you around setting the boundaries. But define what success looks like for you. And that's what's really important. I emphasize you. Also, another part, just quickly, is about expecting the emotional ups and downs. Yes, it's going to be a bit like an emotional roller coaster, and you're going to feel like it's probably going through a bit of a washing machine of emotions. Some days you're going to feel like you're absolutely nailing it. Other days you'll wonder how you'll manage it. And you know what? Both are completely normal. If you've got days of just going, oh my goodness, how am I going to do this? There's too much going on. It's completely overwhelming. Please know that you are not alone. There is someone else that has been there through the same situation. Don't be afraid to find, someone at work or even a close friend that you can go to and have that confidant. Could be even your husband, your partner, that can actually then relate back into what you're going through. Feel free to send me a message if you're on Instagram. You're like, I've got no one else to talk to. Feel free to send a DM. We've all been there. Please know that you're not alone. It's entirely normal. I'm a few years into it, and trust me, I still have the days where I'm going, oh my goodness, how the heck am I going to do this? But I go just one foot in front of the other, just keep going, and it's amazing. We can do this. We can get through it all. As it's the famous saying, we think we need to do it all. We don't need to do it all. We can have it all. We just don't need to do it all, and actually debunk that as well. Mum guilt will naturally creep in. Trust me, you're going to get it. I think 99.9% of mums actually at some point or another experience mum guilt. But you know what? This reminds yourself that you're also setting an example of resilience and ambition for your child. And also, you're doing something for yourself. And I've also got a number of episodes around working mum guilt. So just search in the podcast and you'll be able to find it. To help, write down what your why is and put this in a spot that you can come back and refer to when you're having a bad day or a bad moment. So the next part is about then having a sustainable routine. Once you're back at work, for those, particularly that first month, it's about finding a rhythm and a routine that works for you and your family. So here are some ways to create a routine that doesn't leave you feeling burnt out. Number one, plan your days in advance. So prioritize could be your high focus work during your peak productivity hours. Use time blocking to balance meetings, deep work and breaks. So block that calendar out and don't be afraid to do it. Also, if you're breastfeeding, certainly block time out of your calendar so you can actually make sure you can go pump. Also communicate boundaries. So if you're working flexible hours, let colleagues know your availability. Block your time out of your calendar. Use your email footer to say what your days are. You also use your out of office to help educate your employees and also your teammates. And if you're doing externally facing, like with your customers, if you're going to be there or you're not. What I also find useful is I help write my to-do list. I'm a very list person. on my last day before I'm actually back in, if I've got a day, day that it's a mum day or over a weekend, okay, this is what I've got to do when I return back. Because sometimes you might be on a roll, but then you get so much things that happen with kids and families that I actually forget what I've been working on. And if I've got my list, I'm like, oh, that's right. That's what I've got to do. So just a quick tip that I actually find really useful. Also, just really quickly around simplifying mornings and evenings, set out your clothes, bag, lunches all the night before, keep breakfast simple, and also getting you ready. Remember that getting ready with your child takes so much longer than you expect. So just allow extra time if you can, and build breaks and self-care. I know there's all this stuff around self-care and things like that, but it's important that you need to fill your cup. And also taking short breaks at work to reset and just sort of go, okay, right, I've got this, but also give some of that, acknowledgement of how you're going. It might sound a little bit weird, but enjoy going to the toilet on your own without a small child. I know this was a little bit strange when I first went back to work, going, oh my God, I can actually go and shut the door and I don't have someone trying to come in and join me. But it's also a really nice feeling. Schedule some small moments for yourself as well, whether it's a coffee, a short walk, or some deep breathing, even when you're at the office. Just take this time to also enjoy maybe doing something on your own, but really scheduling that. And also, sleep's going to be your superpower. Protect this as much as possible. Again, boundary setting, your values that's really where it comes in. And also, weekends are really good for some downtime. So, your non work days, or particularly weekends, if you've got an extra set of hands around to help you, really use those first few weeks to recharge, because you're naturally going to be exhausted. You're using your brain in a very different way. Now, I want to talk to you about handling setbacks and adjustments. Even with the best laid plans, things don't always go smoothly. As we know with kids, you got to, kind of plan for the worst and hope for the best. So, here's a few tips on how to handle setbacks without spiraling into stress. Number one, it's about dealing with sick days and unplanned hiccups. I'm sorry, as I mentioned earlier, sick days are going to be inevitable. They will happen. So have a backup plan and have the conversation early of how you think you might approach this. I know between my husband and I, we're often like, right, who's got what meeting and who's got the more important meeting? And we've actually then sometimes even split days. Okay, you do this meeting and then we'll take over and tag team. There's so many different ways that you can actually do this. As our parents are getting older, we then rely on them less because we also don't want to get them sick, but everyone has a different reason, different backup plan and that. So, but it's always good to communicate and also align with your partner and husband on that one. Talk to your employer about remote work options. This is also really handy, but also helps with the flexible work and hybrid options. But also remember, be kind to yourself. One day doesn't define your whole return to work experience, and adjust as you go. The first few weeks might feel chaotic, and they probably will be, but you know what? It gets easier. So do a check-in maybe on the 30-day mark or at key points and just reflect on what's working, what might need adjusting, and what support do you need? As I said, we don't have to do it all. We often think we do, but we don't need to. Do you need to outsource something? Do you need to ask for some additional help? Also, maybe even reflecting on with your partner or your husband of saying, look, how's things going for you? That you could be, you actually really have that check-in. Okay, you could actually be honest. Look, I think can you really help me out here? And I really need your support, or this drop-off pickup, it's being a bit challenging and things. Just also reflect on it as a couple and give yourself permission to make changes. It could be shifting work hours or asking for more help, but everything's just a little bit fluid, particularly at the start. You'll start to find your groove, but I guess also reflecting what's working, what's not, and also making that continuous improvement. Nothing's ever perfect, and there are always things that we're going to change. The plans, just like kids, are going to be fluid, and that's why it's important to have that open and also growth mindset to help you through this phase. This is where going easy on yourself is so important and very helpful for your own mental health. And lastly, before we wrap up, I want to remind you that this journey is all about progress, not perfection. Remember to celebrate the big wins and also identify early about what celebration is. Could it be buying a bottle of champagne, for example, going out for friends, maybe for dinner or something, or even just a nice dinner, even with your husband, or maybe at home or something? Like, what is that celebration about surviving your first day, your first week back, or even your first month. Celebrate the small wins of when things are going well. Could even be the day that your child doesn't cry a drop off. That could just, celebrate those ones, because getting through a tough work call or even managing the daycares, it can be really challenging at times. I'm not going to say it's going to be easy, but if you're prepared and about the transition mentally of going, okay, I know there's going to be some rough days, but I also know there's going to be some good days. Celebrate the wins, and hopefully you're going to have more good days than not so good days. And have a village around you to help share the load, but also celebrate the wins. I know that I would have been lost without two of my really close friends when I was going back and I was going, right, I've got this drama, but they're there to support me. I've gone, right, I've also got a win, and I can also share that with them. So make sure you've also got your people that are going to help elevate you up and support you and wrap their arms around you to either celebrate, but also be that shoulder to cry on, because we're all going to have those moments. But please also remember that you are not alone. Thousands of mums are navigating this transition alongside you, and we're all figuring it out together. We're all working out what works and what doesn't. What works for me is not necessarily going to work for you, but what's most important is that you find that sweet spot about what works for you, your child, and also your family. So just to quickly really wrap this up, some key takeaways. Number 1, preparation and planning to help ease the transition. Number 2, remembering that returning to work is a transition over a period of months. It's not a day. Number 3, reflect on your why and your values and come back to these when you might be having a bad day, or help in setting some boundaries. Number 4, set realistic expectations. Perfection is not the goal. Number 5, small adjustments can make a really big difference in your routine, and also being open and fluid to the ever-ending changes that come with kids and also being a working mum. Number 6, share the load with your husband and your partner and leverage the village for support. Don't be afraid to ask for support. And number 7, be flexible. Celebrate the wins and don't be afraid to ask for support. And from me to you, if you're about to go through the return back into work, please be easy on yourself, and also the best of luck. I hope it's a really positive experience for you. Everyone has a different journey. So hopefully these tips, and I've given you some things to consider, have helped you in some way to support your return so you can navigate the juggle of career and motherhood. So best of luck, and I really honestly wish you the best. And I'd love to also hear how you're going. So feel free to shoot me a DM or anything like that. Just reach out and say, I'm going well, or I'm actually having a bad day, because you know what? We don't always talk about the bad days, but it's okay. If you found this episode helpful, I'd love you to share it with another mum returning to work. And if you've got any questions or experiences from your own return to work, or you've even got ideas on podcast ideas on themes and topics you'd like me to talk about, feel free to shoot me a DM at Working Mama Community on Instagram. I'd love to also hear how your first 90 days back are going. So if you're looking for some more support, check out my free resources for working mums at workingmama.com.au. And you can also follow along on Instagram or LinkedIn for more tips and encouragement. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you next episode.